The first story takes us to a young traveler named Michael, who was planning a short trip for work. He booked a small Airbnb cabin on the outskirts of a quiet town. The photos looked perfect: clean wooden walls, a nice soft bed, a window that overlooked a forest, everything simple and peaceful. The reviews were short but positive. Nothing seemed strange, but the moment he arrived, the air around the cabin felt heavy, as if the place had been abandoned for years. He brushed it off as travel exhaustion. When he stepped inside, however, something felt off. The cabin was spotless but unusually cold, even though the weather outside was warm. The thermostat showed a normal temperature, yet a chill clung to him the moment he shut the door. As he walked further in, he noticed a framed picture on the wall. It showed a family of 4 standing in front of the same cabin, but their faces were blurred, like someone had intentionally smeared them. He assumed it was just an old, damaged photograph. He unpacked, sat down to rest, and tried to shake off the unsettling feeling, but that night he woke up suddenly around 2 a.m. to the sound of footsteps above him. The cabin was single-level. There shouldn't have been anything, or anyone upstairs. Michael froze, listening. Slow, dragging footsteps moved back and forth overhead. He tried convincing himself it was an animal on the roof, but the sound was too deliberate, too human. Then the footsteps stopped directly above him, and the ceiling creaked under the weight of something standing still. His heart pounded as he slowly reached for his phone and turned on the flashlight. At that moment, the light bulb in the bedroom flickered twice, then went dark completely, as if something had drained the power. He forced himself to sit still until sunrise. The moment daylight hit, he grabbed his bag and rushed outside. Before leaving, he looked up at the roof just to confirm what he already feared. There were no footprints, no signs of any animal, nothing. Seconds later, he received a message from the host. "Hope you slept well last night." He didn't reply. Instead, he sped away, promising himself he would never stay in another isolated Airbnb again. When he finally checked the listing days later out of curiosity, it was gone, removed entirely, as if it had never existed at all. Some people online later suggested the picture he saw was blurred because the family in it was no longer alive. No one knows for sure what he heard walking above him, or whether something else had been living in that quiet cabin long before he arrived. The second story comes from a couple named Daniel and Sarah, who booked a small basement apartment for a short vacation. The place looked cozy, and the host seemed friendly in their messages, but something weird happened during check-in. The host greeted them politely but refused to make eye contact, keeping his head slightly turned away the entire time. He gave them the keys, told them to text if they needed anything, and turned around quickly to walk back upstairs without saying goodbye. That should have been the first warning sign. The basement apartment itself was nicer than expected, but there was one thing that bothered them. A metal door, bolted shut, sat in the corner of the living room. It wasn't shown in the listing photos. When they asked the host about it through text, he answered within seconds, "Storage. Please don't touch it." They left it alone. The first night went smoothly, but on the second night, they were awakened by a loud metallic bang. They sat up, startled, listening. Another bang echoed through the room, and then another. The sound was coming from the bolted metal door. Something was hitting it from the other side. They stared at the door in shock as the banging grew louder and faster, like fists pounding. Sarah reached for Daniel's arm, trembling. Then everything went silent. They didn't move, didn't breathe, and waited for what felt like hours. Eventually, exhaustion took over and they fell asleep with the lights on. The next day, they decided to confront the host. When they asked him about the banging, his tone changed completely. "You must be mistaken," he wrote. "That room hasn't been opened in years. No reason to worry." They didn't believe him. That night, the sounds returned, only this time it wasn't banging. It was someone whispering behind the door, the voice too soft to understand but unmistakably human. The couple grabbed their things and fled the apartment at 3 a.m. When they reached the main road, they called the police. Officers arrived, checked the property, and after about an hour came back with unsettling news. The host wasn't allowed to be renting the space. Under the basement apartment was another small room sealed off years ago. According to old records, Someone in the host's family had been kept inside it decades earlier due to severe psychological issues. No one knew what happened to them. The host stopped responding to the couple entirely, and within a week the listing was deleted. Whatever was behind that door still remains a mystery, but to this day, Daniel and Sarah swear they heard both the living and the dead inside that room. Our third story is perhaps the most disturbing. A woman named Claire booked a shared Airbnb because it was cheaper and had great reviews. The listing mentioned the host had 2 guest bedrooms in a large house. When she arrived, the host greeted her warmly and showed her to her room. He seemed normal enough, but the moment the door closed, Claire felt watched. She looked around the bedroom and noticed nothing unusual except a small vent on the wall directly above the bed. She didn't think much of it and went to sleep. Halfway through the night, she woke up from the feeling of air blowing on her face. The vent was making a strange whirring sound. She stared at it for a moment, then suddenly something moved behind the slits. A shadow, a rapid shift, like someone adjusting their position. She sat up quickly and watched the vent, her stomach twisting. There was no reason for anyone to be behind it. The vent was supposed to be for airflow only. The next morning, she asked the host casually if the bedroom vents connected to anything. He smiled calmly and said all vents were connected to a central ventilation system for heating. Something about his answer didn't feel right. That night, Claire left the light on and tried staying awake. Around midnight, she heard a faint tapping from the vent, then a soft dragging sound. Her heart sank as she stood up and walked slowly toward it. When she leaned in closer, she froze. She heard breathing, slow, raspy breathing, coming from inside the vent. She backed away immediately and grabbed her phone to call her friend, whispering that something was wrong. As she stood near the bed, she glanced up again and nearly screamed. Through the slits of the vent, she could now see it clearly, an eye, a human eye staring directly at her. She ran out of the room instantly and bolted out the front door. She spent the night in her car, too terrified to go back inside. When the sun rose, she contacted the police. Officers searched the house thoroughly and found a hidden crawl space running behind the walls of the upstairs rooms. In that crawl space, they found blankets, food wrappers, and small holes that had been carved directly into the ventilation openings of both guest bedrooms. Someone had been watching guests through the vents. When they questioned the host, he admitted that his adult son had been secretly living in the crawl space after losing his job months earlier. The son had been watching multiple guests at night without their knowledge. Claire was horrified to learn that this had been happening for a long time. The Airbnb listing was shut down and the host's son was taken into custody, but the psychological damage it left on Claire was deep. She still has nightmares of that eye in the vent watching her while she slept. Airbnb can be a great convenience, but these stories show just how unpredictable it can become. People expect a safe and private space, but sometimes they step into something far more dangerous, unsettling, or inhuman. Before booking a place, always check the reviews carefully, trust your instincts, and never ignore the feeling that something isn't right. You never truly know who or what might be on the other side of the door, the wall, or even the vent. Thank you for listening to these disturbing Airbnb horror stories. If you enjoyed this video and want more true horror content, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications. Stay safe, stay aware, and as always, sleep with the lights on tonight. Just in case.